Oh, you mean you had a bad dream?
They arrive to the town's gas station with Rod calling out.
Hello.
Tracy says.
You don't need to freak out the Youngbloods.
Rod turns around and says.
It's 3:36 p.m. The more dark it gets, the more spirits come out to play. And they've never been this quiet before.
Jedediah spots blood from inside the station. He walks to it, smelling the bile stench of dried blooded and rotten organs. He opens it to see torn up body parts, and he vomits as the others hurry. Rod says.
This wasn't the Deadites.
Jedediah looks up and says.
How would you know?
Because to dispel the evil you need to cut them to pieces. Why would they cut up a usable body?
Jedediah gives a look of horror and mutters.
Boo.
Rod states to the group.
I'm going around town to see if there are any survivors.
And runs off. Jedediah, Malcolm, and Loretta move off looking for survivors and make a plan to how they get their hands on one of those trucks. As they walk, Malcolm holds out the PKE meter with Jedediah looking at him saying,
Do you really need that here?
Malcolm looks at him and says,
These spiritual entities that possess people produce high levels of psychokinetic energy. So I think it would come in handy here.
Jedediah replies.
It's loud.
Loretta continues.
I don't know what psychokinetic energy is, but I didn't have enough time to read my notebook.
Jedediah slaps his head, spotting a makeshift drug set up. He walks up and says. He takes a couple and says.
Just in case.
The three get startled by a noise. Seeing Tim stumble in and points up at the roof of the building, a crack in it and a cord stuck in it, the cord going down and just above the floor. Then at the table it was tied up by the leg. Jedediah puts the pills in his pocket and steps back with Tim stating.
If you had pulled that table, that wall would have went, then the ceiling, then this whole room.
Jedediah remembers Tim being good at domino tricks and nods. On the way out, Jedediah spots a newspaper, the headline reading, Tommy Jarvis locked up after murdering Dr. Pam Roberts. He picks up the paper and puts it in his pocket to read it later. As they leave, they spot a storm coming over the horizon, with Jedediah remarking,
That's not terrible, right?
Jennifer replies,
It's a normal thunderstorm, but because it blocks out the sun, the Deadites are already getting stronger. Tim, get the radio, we're heading inside.
Jedediah, hearing the noises of the Deadites lurking closer, moves after Dean, Taffeta, Loretta, and Malcolm run into a local motel. Jedediah holds the door open for Tim and Jennifer, Tim carrying the heavy radio inside as Jennifer grabs the food supplies meant for trading. She snags on a wooden post. She quickly unhooks the bag and runs right as the rain and thunder drop. The noise gets louder. Jedediah can hear it ringing in his ears right as the ground gets muddy. Jennifer slips, the noise gets closer. Jedediah hears Taffeta shout,
Leave her close to the door.
Jedediah looks at his hand, hearing the girls humming the Freddy theme. He holds it out, and in seconds the pain is massive. He moves as fast as he can, seeing the rain drop. Like slow images. The blood leaking from his nose. Right as he reaches Jennifer, he feels his leg gets cut, and he drops to the ground. He turns to see the clawed hand slowly existing. He lets time speed back up as to avoid that. As it does, the hand vanished and the loud voices are louder than before and closer. He helps her, and the two run. Taffeta is about to close the door, but Dean pushes her away and shouts,
Hurry up.
The two make it to the door with seconds to spare, and Dean slams the door shut and holds it as the force from outside slams into. He holds it, shouting,
Get something heavy.
Jedediah spots a table and shoves Malcolm, pointing at it, and says,
Help me lift this.
Jennifer gets up too and grabs from one side, Tim the other, Malcolm the back, and Jedediah the front, clearing the way. They move it to the door and raise it up, and everyone gets to the top and pushes it forward. Dean moves out of the way when they get it close enough to push it, and it's seamlessly blocking the door. They hear the furious pounding from the other side. The others gasp, with Jennifer grabbing Jedediah and asks him,
How did you do that?
He looks around and still ponders on what to say as Malcolm stands up.
He just found out about it. I told him to keep it a secret, which if he had, this wouldn't have worked out as good.
Jennifer sighs and says,
We'll talk more about that later, then let's see if any of the elders made it to somewhere safe.
As the others leave, Jedediah stops by Malcolm and says,
Thank you.
I didn't do it out of kindness. We need you alive, and if I told everyone that the world is ending because you made a selfish decision, we wouldn't stand a chance once we head off to find that Ash guy you spoke of.
Jedediah nods and walks forward, almost falling over as Malcolm grabs his arm, asking,
That bad, huh?
My legs feel like jelly.
He carries him upstairs. After minutes of setting up in a room, tuning the radio to see if it could reach anyone, and Malcolm finding a spot to set Jedediah down, Dean walks out, seeing Jedediah's leg wound, asking,
What cut you?
He looks him in the eye and says,
A branch.
Dean looks him dead in the eyes, almost a look of knowledge, like he recognized this cut. He walks off to get some bandages. As Malcolm and Loretta get up, Loretta asks,
What did cut you?
Jedediah thinks and remembers his father in the third timeline he visited saying that Kruger spreads by people knowing his existence. He looks up and says,
Like I said, a branch.
Dean returns with rubbing alcohol and bandages. He takes a rag, pouring the alcohol on it, and rubs his leg wound, with Jedediah groaning in pain. Then he wraps it up to keep an infection from happening. He looks at Jedediah and says,
You'll need to change it each day.
He nods in agreement and Dean leaves. Taffeta walks up to Jedediah and says,
You're quick, huh?
Jedediah, knowing her a bit, looks at her and says,
What do you want?
She walks up and says,
I'm sorry about the door, it just didn't seem like you would make it. But if you could use the power again to help.
Jedediah just looks up and says,
I'll only use it to save you if A, it doesn't hurt later. Because my brain hurts after using it for too long. And B, you aren't a dick. You get 3 strikes. That was strike 1. After 3, I won't save you.
She walks off and says,
I know she ends up nicer in the sequel, so I'll give her a chance, but as soon as she harms anyone, I'm letting whatever is out there eat her.
The two nod in agreement. But Loretta stops and says,
Sequel?
He tells her,
Ask him later.
He starts to hear Jennifer start to get louder.
Alpha Elder, this is Alpha Youngblood, do you copy?
She hears nothing again and throws the microphone to the ground as Tim goes to comfort her, hugging her, saying,
It's gonna be okay.
Jedediah sits there feeling pity for the pain he's caused. He shakes it off, saying to himself,
Anyone else would have done the same.
He gets up, limping out of the room. He makes it downstairs, seeing Dean with a really big bottle of Jägermeister. Jedediah walks in, seeing him drinking the stuff down. Dean asks,
Any luck?
I haven't gotten through to any of the elder class yet.
Dean sets down the bottle, digging in his bag, and gives an equal-sized bottle of Jägermeister to Jedediah, and he looks down at it and says,
What's this for?
It tastes like vomit, but if you drink enough you black out. Make sure to drink enough you can't speak. Otherwise you dream that thing.
Jedediah nods, but then has a look of realization and looks up at the man and says,
How?
Dean says,
I've dreamed of that thing since I was a kid. The marks on your foot came out of nowhere. I don't know about that quick move you got, but that hypnagogic hallucinations when you're so tired you start dreaming while you're awake. See, that's its best gimmick. If it can't kill you while you dream, it keeps you awake long enough to where it can attack while you're awake or you die from lack of sleep. There was this one friend I knew, he drank so much and did so much shit to stay awake he died from oding.
Jedediah looks up at him and says,
Thanks.
Neither of them notice the breathing coming from beneath the floorboards as a hand reaches up at the boards and the person walks down a long dirt tunnel towards the camp. About 4 days pass. Jedediah sits next to Loretta and Malcolm watching the two sleep as he has a massive hangover due to the large amount of drinking he's been doing. Hearing Jennifer keep talking to dead air as the storm still rages outside with Jedediah speaks up.
I can take over.
No.
Jedediah answers back.
You haven't slept in 4 days. If you're going to lead us to safety, you need to sleep. I've been black out for like 2 days. Besides the hangover, I haven't seen anything that isn't there.
Jennifer sighs and rubs her eyes and says,
All right.
She sets down the radio. She walks over to Jedediah and asks,
I know you didn't want to keep it secret, and I'm grateful for you using it to save me, but is there a chance you could use it to go outside and check out the town?
He shakes his head saying,
It hurts the longer I use it. And if I use it for too long, I pass out where my body is at normal speed. I also think because I've been sleeping more, I don't even know if I could tap into it. Plus, I don't know if it's faster without a vessel.
She nods and yawns from exhaustion and says,
Wake me if you get a response.
He nods as she walks away. He picks up the radio and says,
Alpha Elder, this is Omega Youngblood. It's been 4 days. Is anyone there?
No response. After 10 minutes, Jedediah can hear Tim shouting,
Don't touch the bag!
He leaves the radio and moves upstairs, hearing Taffeta shout back,
It's been 4 days, and when we arrived the colony was all but dead. I think I can eat a bit of the food.
Jedediah gets upstairs and says,
Hey, I have a headache, and people downstairs are trying to sleep. What the hell is happening?
Tim answers him,
She's trying to steal from our trade even though she already ate from our ration.
She responds,
I'm still hungry. I know that the people are dead here, they don't need the food.
Jedediah steps up and says,
Tim, if another 2 days past our rations won't last forever. And Taffeta,
she pulls out Becky and aims it, saying,
Until then, if you try anything else, you are already on 2 strikes. You get 1 more. If you make another strike, then after that, if you make another noise, Becky here will make a noise. If you have a question, Becky will answer it. Got it? 2 days. If we have no response or sign that the storm is lightening up, that we could go check out the rest of the town for our people, then you may take from the trade. Until then, shut it.
Taffeta nods. Jedediah looks at Tim.
Go take the bag downstairs and watch it. If you get tired, go wake Malcolm.
Tim nods and was about to walk away but stops, asking,
Which one is Malcolm?
Jedediah turns and says,
The blonde sleeping next to my sister. He likes to be called Malcolm. Get used to it, because I'm already used to it, and I'm getting annoyed with saying the other name. It's getting very confusing.
Tim nods and walks away, and as his steps fade, Jedediah lowers the gun and follows suit. About an hour of trying the radio, he spots Malcolm watching the bag and sits across from him, pulling out the newspaper header from earlier.
After killing Jason Voorhees, Tommy Jarvis has been visiting psychiatric facility after psychiatric facility, stopping at Pinehurst Youth Development Center. He finally snapped, killing one of the doctors before being arrested by police.
Malcolm looks up and asks,
What?
He looks at him and says that
the doctor's picture, I've seen her before in a vision. In one of the other timelines, you told me these visions were warnings. The first one, I found out about my grandfather. I saw a vision of this woman about to be attacked by a man in a hockey mask and a hospital gown, holding a knife.
Malcolm looks interested and asks,
What else did you see?
He looks down at the paper and says,
An old tall man calling to a boy, a phone call two people, a woman on the phone saying, "Have you seen the cats yet?" and a man with nails all over his head, a woman hanging herself to some kid named Damien, and a man saying, "I slept too long."
Malcolm says.
Nothing else?
He thinks and says.
A deep voice saying, "Time to wake up." Not in anger, but it sounded like sadness.
He looks up with Malcolm being just as confused as him. After that, Jedediah leaves to go sit by the radio saying every 10 minutes the same as before.
Anyone left alive out there?
Around 50 minutes of this he says.
If someone is alive, please pick up.
Silence fills the room as he hears a wooden floor creak. He turns around to where he was earlier with Dean to see a wooden trap door wide open. He then hears footsteps near the stairs and going up with him saying,
"Please don't let this be how I go out. Hey, anyone up there?"
The slow creaks stop. And then rapid footsteps move. He thinks it's Taffeta and decides to make this her strike 3. Then he hears a door slam, which he assumes is her being a brat, until he hears Taffeta shout,
"Keep that noise down."
And he turns around following the noise, spotting a room with a locked door. He goes to the door hearing something wooden being bent and primed. He turns the knob.
Hey!
He starts to slam on the door as he hears something metal being moved, then glass shattering. Then the door pushes back, knocking him to the floor as he hears something on the other side slamming on it. He screams out,
"Everyone wake the f*** up and meet in the kitchen."
He gets up, turning around, spotting a man in a blue mechanic suit with the same hockey mask. He quickly pulls out Becky, spotting the metal grate. Next to him, he must have used the vents. Right as he comes to that conclusion, the door stops slamming and the moaning from outside was inside the vents. In seconds, he sees the figure run downstairs. As he hears the noise getting closer, he puts his gun away, running down the stairs, seeing everyone there, and he asks,
"Did you see him?"
Jennifer asks.
"Or who?"
Then she hears the moaning and steps back as Jedediah replies,
"Doesn't matter. Kitchen has a door open."
Jennifer shouts,
"Move."
And everyone runs to the kitchen. As they make it, Dean asks,
Where does that even go?
Then Jedediah turns around, hearing something crashing around, and replies,
"Anywhere that's not here."
And everyone hurries in. Jedediah goes in last, shutting the door. But he feels something pulling on it. He turns around, spotting a crowbar, and yells,
"Get it!"
Most continue to run, but Loretta and Jennifer stay back. Loretta looking at this situation, not even now what's going on. The door pulls harder and Jennifer goes to help hold it with him, shouting,
"We need to lock the door!"
"You can't hold it by yourself."
Loretta looking around, not even knowing what's going on, grabbing her head, starting to freak out. In seconds, she stops, and as Jedediah turns around, she grabs the crowbar almost as if she knew what to do, shoves the thing into place, and the door is held in place as the entity keeps pulling. Jenny, Fair shouts,
"That won't hold it for long, let's go."
Loretta and Jedediah follow suit.